right, good afternoon. We'll call to order the Petersburg Borough Assembly meeting for Tuesday, September 8th, 2020. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Jay?
Here.
Bob?
Here.
Mark?
Mark is excused.
Randy?
Here.
Taylor?
Taylor is excused.
Chelsea?
Here.
Jeff?
Here.
Thank you.
All right, that gives us five members in the Assembly today. With that, let's move on to the voluntary Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag, United States of America, to the Republic, which stands one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. That brings us on to the approval of minutes. There are no minutes available for approval today. With that, it comes down to the amendment or approval of today's meeting agenda. Without any amendments, I would entertain a motion to approve.
So moved. Second.
And moved by Member Mucci and seconded by Member Lynn. All those in favor say aye for approving the meeting agenda as is. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, we've approved today's meeting agenda. There are no public hearings today, which brings us to bid awards. 2020 sand bid. Public Works Director Kata is recommending an award of the winter sand bid to Rock and Road Construction for an amount not to exceed $57,000. The proposed fiscal year 2021 streets and department budget includes $60,000 for this expense. I would entertain a motion to approve this bid award.
So moved. Second.
Been moved by Member Mucci and seconded by Member Trimble. Any discussion on this bid award?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, proceed.
Just a simple question, but what is the additive that is? Thank you.
Director Kata, could you chime in on that? Jeff cut out a little bit there, but I think he's asking about an additive.
Yeah, the additive was just the extra tonnage that's in the bid. I think it was 500 tons. We usually will do a base bid for a certain amount, and then we'll do an additive just to see where the price comes in. If we have enough budget, we'll usually go for the extra. So that's what's going on there.
Does that answer your question, Member Mucci?
Yes, it did. Thank you very much.
You bet. Any further discussion on this bid award? With that, will the clerk please call the roll?
Bob?
Yes.
Randy?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Chelsea?
Yes.
Thank you.
And that bid is approved unanimously. Bringing us to persons to be heard related to the agenda. Clerk Thompson, are there folks online waiting to speak today on items related to the agenda?
Yes, it does look like there is. Keith, if you could please unmute Becky Turland.
Line is open.
Hello, I am actually here available in case there's any questions once you get down to the child care information and the grant items there.
Excellent. Anything you'd like to say about it to begin with, or should we call upon you if needed during that time, Becky?
Well, I do want to just express that, our community has felt the need, and through COVID and even before that, our child care system is a huge asset to our community, and we need to be able to support our families as we go into this venture and the change of the school. So I would hope that everybody there would see the importance of helping our families and making sure that they can stay working.
Thank you, Becky.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else?
Nope, that is it at this time.
Thank you, Becky. And before we pull the next caller, Clerk Thompson, just a reminder that we've got a 5-minute time limit for testimony and to address the Assembly as a whole and be civil and respectful. That's generally not a problem, but it should be said anyway. So please proceed to the next caller, Clerk Thompson.
Thank you. Keith, if you could please unmute Joni Johnson.
Line is open.
Hi, this is Joni Johnson, and similar to Becky, I was just calling in if there were any questions regarding Resolution 2020-17 for the emergency financial assistance to families for child care. And I guess, similarly, I guess I would say that, most of those questions dealing with administration and the like would go to Becky with Petersburg Mental Health Services. But if there were more questions regarding information and data that went into the request, that I could perhaps help with that. But it's been an issue that has, come up, and they discussed it in the last meeting. So thank you for considering.
Thank you, Joni. Appreciate it.
And Keith, if you could please unmute Sarah Holmgrain.
Yes, line is open.
Hi, good afternoon. This is Sarah Holmgrain, and I'm representing the Chamber of Commerce Board as a board member, and so we represent the members of the Chamber of Commerce. I just wanted to make a brief statement. The Petersburg Chamber of Commerce Board supports the Assembly's resolution that you'll be discussing today, which is 2020-16, that would support the expenditure of $500,000 from the CARES Act Special Revenue Fund for economic support to businesses in Petersburg. We strongly agree that the CARES Act money should be distributed back into the community where the loss of revenue has been felt during this pandemic. The Chamber urges you to consider this plan as Petersburg businesses are considered the backbone of our community. And they contribute so much to our community, both in employment as well as donations to local charities. Many businesses are uncertain if they will still have their doors open after the pandemic is over. And although many businesses have taken advantage of the Paycheck Protection Program and or the economic injury disaster loans, it simply is not enough to ensure that they're going to be able to survive the long fall, winter, and even into spring, especially in light of our low revenue generated this summer. Your consideration of this matter is greatly appreciated, and we advocate on behalf of our businesses in Petersburg, and as always, thank you for your time and dedication to our community. And I can stay on the line if anybody has any questions, but we just wanted to put an additive support from the Chamber of Commerce and how we believe the resolution would be money well spent by helping businesses that are struggling. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Much appreciated.
Okay, and Keith, if you could please unmute Will Ware.
The line is open.
Yeah, good afternoon. This is Will Ware. I own the Cedar Box down here on Main Street, and I just wanted to voice my voice of support for Resolution 2020-16, and it's a resolution, of course, approving the expenditure out of the CARES Act Special Revenue Fund for economic support. I actually like using the term economic stabilization, and I think Liz Cabrera has done a great job of doing research to find out what other communities are doing with their CARES Act funds to help to stabilize the economy and businesses in their communities, and tailored it to work well for our community right here in Petersburg. And I think she's been pretty ingenious in it, and I thank her for her support, and I ask that you guys would as I've done before, take action to help stabilize the economy right here in Petersburg. So thank you very much, and I appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Will. Appreciate your testimony.
Okay, Vice Mayor Stanton Gregor, I believe that is all of the callers that wanted to speak. We do have one other caller on the line. It's Ro from the hospital, but I'm pretty sure she's there just to answer any questions if need be. She did not say that she wanted to speak.
Okay, and do we have anyone who wanted to speak on persons to be heard unrelated to the agenda?
We do not.
Okay, with that we will proceed. Board, Commission, Committee reports. We have nothing on the agenda today, which brings us to the consent agenda. For those of you listening at home who aren't familiar with the consent agenda, it's more or less formalities that we generally quickly approve, but I'll divide them out individually. Item A on the consent agenda is the appointment of Julie Walker to the Local Emergency Planning Committee. Petersburg Local Emergency Planning Committee is requesting Assembly approval to appoint Julie Walker, who is employed as Petersburg Medical Center's Community Wellness Specialist, to the community's hospital seat previously held by Lori Miller, who has moved away. I'd entertain a motion to approve this.
So moved.
Second.
Motion been made by Member Mucci, seconded by Member Tremblay. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Jeff?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Chelsea?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Brandy?
Yes.
Thank you.
And passes unanimous, and thank you, Ms. Walker, for being a part of that committee. Brings us to item B, the 420 retail marijuana store license renewal. The 420 has applied with the state Alaska Alcohol and Marijuana Control Office for a retail marijuana store license renewal. Assembly may support or protest the application. The protest may not be arbitrary, capricious, or unreasonable. I would entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
Motion been made by Member Mucci and seconded by Member Tremblay. Any protests? In that case, will the clerk please call the roll?
Chelsea?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Brandy?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Thank you.
And that passes unanimously, bringing us to item C on the consent agenda, Seaweed Farms Standard Marijuana Cultivation Facility License Renewal. Seaweed Farms has applied with the Alaska Alcohol and Marijuana Control Office for a Standard Marijuana Cultivation Facility License Renewal. The Assembly may support or protest the application. The protest may not be arbitrary, capricious, or unreasonable. I would entertain a motion to approve this.
So moved.
Second.
Motion been made by Member Mucci and seconded by Member Tremblay. Are there any protests? With that, will the clerk please call the roll?
Jay?
Yes.
Chelsea?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Brandy?
Yes.
Thank you.
And that passes unanimously. Bringing us to item 11, report of other officers. Let's get a SEPA update from Assembly Member Lynn. Member Lynn, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. I chaired a meeting last week, a SEPA meeting related to submarine cable, and I'm not going to get into a lot of the details. I will say that the board unanimously approved offering the contract to Sumitomo Inc., which is a U.S. subsidiary of a Japanese corporation. And we, with that, there was substantial work which I'll not get into, and the SEPA, they will have a much more detailed package coming out here in about a week. I will say that the submarine cable will probably not be replaced till March, April of next year because of all the work that has to be done, and the cable itself has to be manufactured. With that, I'll stop, and I know that Trey will have a detailed accounting of this in about a week or so, unless you have some questions for me.
Any questions for Member Lynn?
Mr. Mayor?
Absolutely. Go ahead, Member Mucci.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just one question. When they're replacing this cable, will they be doing any other work with the already in place cables, or will they just be working on this one cable?
Thank you.
Good. A good question. What the contract requires is the laying of the new cable and the removal of the damaged cable. And on both ends, where it comes out of the water, there has to be a new type of a stanchion or a new station, because the new cable is of a different, it has 3 phases in one cable, so it has a different configuration to be done. And part of this is going to be done in-house. Other than that, we are insured for a portion up to about $5 million plus. But until we pull that cable up and know everything has to be paid for. This essentially takes all our assets up front. And Member Much, I hope, did that answer your question?
Yes, it does, Member Lynn. Thank you very much.
Anything else from Member Lynn, members of the Assembly? Okay, Bob, thank you so much. Look forward to more updates coming down the pike. That brings us to the Mayor's report for today. Item number 1, community discussion on proposed ordinance 2020-19, an ordinance amending Borough Code Chapter 3.72 to provide for civil emergency provisions. The Petersburg Borough Assembly will host a community discussion for September 10th, beginning at 4 p.m. on the subject of ordinance 2020-19. The discussion will be telephonic. Interested persons may participate by calling 800-954-0633 just prior to 4 p.m. The Borough will prepare answers and comments to questions and proposed changes submitted by the public by the September 3rd deadline. The questions and answers document will be available by noon Wednesday, September 9th on the Borough's website in hard copy format at the Municipal Building. The Assembly will also read the questions and answers during the community discussion. The Borough Assembly, Attorney, Incident Commander Hagerman, Petersburg Medical Center CEO Hofstetter, and other selected Borough staff members will be present during the meeting. There will be oral presentations which will provide information regarding the ordinance. For more information, contact Clerk Thompson at bthompson@petersburgak.gov or 772-5405. Number 2, the 2020 Petersburg Borough Municipal Election. Our municipal election will be held in the Community Gym on Tuesday, October 6th, 2020 from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. In-person absentee voting will be offered in the Municipal Building Training Room beginning on Wednesday, September 16th, 2020, and will continue Monday through Friday from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. through Friday, October 2nd. Absentee voting will end at noon Monday, October 5th. Absentee voting is also offered by mail or electronic submission. By mail may be requested in person, by phone, by fax, or by written request, including email. The request must include the voter name, borough residence address, one identifier, which could be an Alaska voter number, Alaska driver's license number, date of birth, or last 4 numbers of your social security number, and the mailing address where the ballot should be sent. The last day to request an absentee ballot by mail is October 1, 2020. Voters interested in absentee voting by electronic submission should contact Clerk Thompson for an application at bthompson@petersburgak.gov or 772-5405. And I will definitely make the plug for early absentee voting. I always do it. It's always fun to walk around early with your sticker on to try to drive voter turnout. The more people that turn out to vote, the better it is for democracy. So please vote. And with that, I will turn it over to Manager Giesbeck for the manager's report.
Thank you, sir. We've started, almost completed at this point, Phase 2 of reopening at Parks and Rec. Phase 2 focused more on the evening swim times, trying to do something every single evening for everyone. It also involved moving equipment to the fitness court and closing the mezzanine. This keeps the school kids safe from droplets coming down from the patrons working out on the mezzanine and puts all the fitness equipment in one portion of the community center. We have an upcoming lifeguard class, which may actually be already filled, but if anyone is interested in the class, it is to be held September 16th through the 20th. Please contact Stephanie Payne for seat availability. We'll putting together a plan for the fall youth basketball program and looking into future programs, kind of the after-school, early evening type events. The challenge right now we're having is finding available community gym time. We're working with the school currently as the gym reserved from 8 a.m. until 6 p.m. Monday through Friday. So we'll work with them and come up with some times that work for the community. Our master swim coach, Scott Bird, is also now the new Viking Swim Club head coach. Congratulations to Scott. He will still be very active in our programs as he is still on our staff. We're waiting for the Ragnarok Rollers and the hockey group to gain approval for their mitigation plans so they may use the gym again. We're also working with the folks around Oktoberfest to get the plans done for it. Finance has been undergoing our annual audit these last couple of weeks, and the contract property assessors were in town last week and will be back as needed. Jody continues to work with FEMA to develop a list of expenses that they will reimburse the borough for that are related to COVID, and tracking the CARES Act funding, which seems to change every few weeks as far as what we're expected to report on. Starting today, the library will be open expanded hours Tuesday through Thursday, 11 to 8, and Friday and Saturday, 11 to 6. The Rainforest Festival will be held September 10th through the 13th. All events are being held virtually this year. Information at www.akrainforestfest.org. 2 grants have been received to purchase material for the library collection, one from the state of Alaska for $7,000 and another from the Institute for Museum and Library Services for $10,000 in partnership with the Petersburg Indian Association. So thanks for all of them for keeping our libraries in good shape. Sandy had been filling in for our incident commander for Carl. Wanted to give her a big thank you. She continues to work on COVID-related stuff as well, and we're still looking for a few more temporary employees for the greeter and screener labor pool at the airport. Carl is back today. Thank you to the volunteers who continue to participate in training at the fire hall and EMS and respond to emergencies during those abnormal times. Big thank you to Petersburg Medical Center for offering the 3rd round of asymptomatic COVID testing to first responders. The process is very quick and efficient and makes sure our folks are staying safe. Sandy does encourage everyone to sign up for the Alaska Travel Portal and complete the travel declaration form if they will be traveling out of state and returning to Alaska. It's much easier to do it ahead of time than when you return. We opened assisted living on August 26th. Friends and family need to call for an appointment to enter the facility. All details on the reopening plan is on the Borough website. Residents and family are very, very happy to see their loved ones. Elderly housing continues to strongly encourage vendors and visitors entering the property to wear masks in any of the public areas of the facility and to use hand sanitizer upon entering and leaving the facility. The fire panel at the manor was repaired by Johnson Controls. All is well, and thankfully no more 24/7 fire watch at the buildings. Public Works crew repaired a failing sewer service at LeConte RV Park. We coordinated with the park owner and with Alaska DOT to perform the necessary excavation and sidewalk removal replacement. Design work on the motor pool shop repairs is continuing. We've been answering questions for information from the new adjuster and design engineer, and we're getting closer to having the details finalized. The solid waste baler continues to experience periodic control outages, although these have lately been of very, very short duration and not significantly impacted operations. We're working with the equipment provider and local electricians to isolate the source of the trouble so we can get them to fix it permanently. We continue to have problems in town with garbage bears. Residents are strongly encouraged to keep garbage securely stored, preferably indoors, until the day of pickup. Fish and Game deployed a bear trap at Public Works, so one day later captured a nuisance bear. They towed away the trap containing the captured bear just before Chris sent me this report. The Alaska Department of Natural Resources renewed the cooperative resource management agreement with the borough for maintenance of recreation sites within the Ernie Haugen public use area. Some funding has been received for maintenance performed up through June 30th, 2020, and we are working on obtaining funding for the FY21 maintenance. The Forest Service has also been helping us with maintenance at the sites by keeping the restrooms clean and the garbage cans empty. They are also now cleaning the restroom at the gun range as well. Huge thank you to the U.S. Forest Service crew for helping us out with that. And that's the end of my report.
Thank you, Steve. Are there any questions for the manager? All right. Thank you very much, Steve. All right.
Welcome.
That brings us down to unfinished business, which we have none. Which brings us to new business. Item A, Resolution 2020-15. A resolution approving the expenditure of $608,345 from the CARES Act Special Revenue Fund for Petersburg Medical Center personnel costs, technology equipment for home health, rapid testing equipment and supplies, and therapeutic exercise equipment for long-term care in response to the continuing COVID-19 health emergency. I would entertain a motion to approve this resolution.
So moved.
Second.
Motion has been made by Member Mucci and seconded by Member Tremblay. Discussion.
I have a couple questions.
Go right ahead, Member Morrell.
I would like to know how much money has been received already by the hospital for COVID relief in any form, and what they're anticipating receiving in addition to what they've already received.
Excellent. Clerk Thompson, you said Rocio was on the line. I imagine it was for a question such as this, yes?
Rocio is on the line.
Or Phil Hofstetter?
Yes, I believe Phil is also on the line.
Yeah, this is Phil. Actually, I would defer the exact level. I'll probably defer to Roe. I did ask her to sit in on this for that level of detail. We did receive funding for the Federal Protection Program as well as CARES Act. That money was applied to lost revenue, and for most of our payroll, these requests are above and beyond those. We do anticipate, or I guess we are chasing after other sources of funding. This request is really a last-ditch effort of a placeholder request. We are still looking at grants. We're assessing FEMA reimbursement. We are looking at other avenues to obtain funding. I don't anticipate us using this amount. However, I don't know. We were actually on the last. We made the list for the last recipients for the Alaska Community Foundation, and at the last minute we were removed from that, unfortunately. So you never know with the funding. So this ask is not to say we're not going to request other funding, or we don't have other funding in the line. We just don't know. And the hope is to secure a placeholder for this funding so that we can move forward. We're still, long term, we are significantly down in revenue, and we're trying to make sure that we can maintain operations. A lot of our effort has been focused outside of the facility, asymptomatic testing, which takes away from our routine day-to-day services as well. So, but to answer your question, Ro, I'm going to ask Ro if she's there to.
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Go right ahead, Ro. Hear you clear as day.
Okay. So, we did receive, I think it's approx. $3.6 million on CARES Act funding. That is, like Phil was stating, that was for loss of revenue. We, during the months of April, May, and June, pretty much we were down 50% on services provided and therefore on revenue, and we are still down 30%. So most of that funding is to cover normal operations. And to state again what Phil is saying, we are looking for a placeholder. We have a grant writer that is searching for money all the time and funding for us, and we also are working with FEMA, but FEMA is very particular. They change
They don't cover for any, like you probably know this, but they don't cover for any budgeted employees. So all the salaries for our normal employees, for quality manager, or the IT, anything like that, is not going to be covered for FEMA, and that's what we are putting in this request. If we find funding from somewhere else, great, but if not, we would like to have a placeholder for these funds.
Thank you, Ro. Member Morrell, does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. I just, I understand the need for a placeholder, but me personally, if it's not needed, I'd rather see it go back and move. And so I don't know how that works. If that's just as a placeholder, is that going directly into the hospital's account right now, and they can use it at a later date, or is that something that would be given back to the borough if grant money comes through?
That's a good clarifier. Phil, can you clarify that?
I can answer one of you. Hello, do you want to answer that one?
I can answer that one. Yeah, we are not looking for having that deposited into account. We are just, what we are looking for is the borough to keep this money just in case we need it. And we will receive it at a later on, whenever it's needed, and if it's needed.
Good clarifier. Does that clarify for you, Member Morrell?
Yes, that helps a lot. Thank you.
You bet. Any other discussion?
Yes, I have something.
Absolutely. Go ahead, Member Tremblay.
Yeah, I just wanted to go through what exactly is in the request for people listening at home. It includes payroll and emergency hires, and this includes supporting the crisis COVID hotline, supporting the staff for all the work that they're doing for that, as well as running the tests and being part of the incident command team. It also includes septic test equipment. They're putting in a request for a 4-bay unit that would allow them to test a maximum of 6 specimens in an hour, which would be a nice step up from where we are right now. There's also a new step elliptical for long-term care to help support health for the folks living in there, given the risk factors that they're having to live under, as well as, this is very exciting, in-home monitoring units for supporting home health, tracking vital signs, glucose, and pulse oximeters. So that is what, there's a few more specifics, but that's the broad stroke of what this request would be covering, and I hope that there is success in the other funding pursuits, but supporting our hospital in the duration seems pretty important to me, so I'll be voting to support this for sure.
Thank you for those comments, Member Tremblay. Any further discussion?
Mr. Mayor?
Absolutely, Member Michi. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just, I guess, a question for Phil. Obviously, this funding has to be spent by the end of this year. And I'm looking at the total request. Out of that $600,000, I see that we have $499,000 that covers payroll. What happens in January when that money has gone away? What are we going to be, or what are you going to be using to make up for that $500,000 funding deficit that won't be covered by the CARES money? Thank you.
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, as long as we have to focus our efforts towards COVID, the concern is on the long-term effect of that is we might not be able to provide some of the asymptomatic testing services outside in the community. And then we'll have to look at, from a business standpoint, what are some of the service lines that we will then potentially have to cut. And that's a road I hope we don't have to go down, but it's in the reality of business, we're going to have to look at some of those things very critically. So for now, economically, we want to be as strong as possible, as sustainable as possible. I think it adds to the economic revitalization of the community. Looking at the long-term effects, we have to look at things that are going to make sense from a business standpoint. Healthcare is certainly on the forefront of that. So there are hard decisions that may still need to be made down the line, Member Mucci, and I definitely, like I said, I hope we don't have to go down that road, but it's certainly on the table.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would just hate to see us lose services in between services and payroll. You guys are doing a great job up there, but I just hate to see us lose additional services. So, yeah, thanks, Phil. I appreciate the answer.
Any further discussion? I'll briefly chime in. I'm definitely voting yes. Again, I think Member Tremblay did a really good job lining out, specifically what this money will be used for potentially. As Member Morrell asked, the hospital will be seeking any source of funding possible out there, and if this money isn't needed, then they won't be receiving it. But I think we're all pulling to the hospital to get as much funding as possible. So we'll be voting yes on this. Any further discussion by anyone? Okay, the clerk, please call the roll.
Jeff?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Brandy?
Yes.
Chelsea?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Thank you.
And Resolution 2020-15 passes unanimously. Bringing us down to item B, Resolution 2020-16, a resolution approving the expenditure of $500,000 from the CARES Act Special Revenue Fund for economic support to businesses harmed by the continuing COVID-19 public health emergency. I would entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
Motion has been made by Member Mucci and seconded by Member Morrell. Before we get into the discussion, I was hoping that Dr. Cabrera could speak a little bit to this, since this is kind of her wheelhouse, if that's okay with you, Liz?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Can you hear me okay?
Clear as day. Go ahead, Liz.
I was just messing with my phone. Basically, this program would provide opportunity for local businesses who have suffered a loss in gross sales over the last year as a result of the public health emergency to apply for grant funding to try and mitigate that loss. But the idea is to focus on those businesses that did experience a significant loss of at least 20% from the same time period in 2019, or at least $10,000. As you know, as you could probably tell, some businesses are certainly affected more than others, and the aim is to try and address those that really have been impacted significantly. During the application process, we would, add up all of the funding requests and then try to mitigate the loss by, the goal is 20%, but if we receive applications in excess of the available funding, we'll prorate that down accordingly across all of the applications. So that's the gist of it anyway.
Thank you, Liz. Appreciate that. Discussion by the Assembly.
Yes, if I might, Mr. Mayor.
Member Lynn, start us off.
Yeah, back to Liz again. The criteria you come up with, I thought was very good. Can you relate that to the requirements both on the federal side and the state side, and how you come to the criteria which you have in there?
Okay. So there was two main programs at the federal level. One was called, we call it EIDL, which was Economic Injury Disaster Loan and Grant Program. That was run through the SBA. The grant portion of that individual businesses could apply once there was an emergency declaration. The availability was up to $10,000 per business. The reality was that businesses received about $1,000 per employee. So in Petersburg, businesses received in total about $270,000. There was, after that, businesses could apply for a loan, and there's a pretty low rate of interest. I think it was 2.75 or 3.75. A lot of businesses that I spoke to, they were not particularly interested in taking a loan with so much uncertainty, so many of them just stopped at the grant portion of that. Following that program, the feds also launched what's called the PPP program. That's the Paycheck Protection Program, and that was designed to keep employees on the job. And so businesses could apply for a grant or a loan, actually, the equivalent of 2.5 months worth of their payroll. This went through our local banks, who did a stellar job of really getting the funding out into the community. In the memo I provided, you could see that we received, I think it was like $6 million across all of our businesses through that program. That program, the eligibility changed. It evolved quite a bit. I think the businesses that really were able to access it early on were kind of more the brick and mortar types. They didn't deal very well initially with seasonal businesses. Over time that got better, but some businesses had applied early on and had trouble being able to have their loan adjusted. And then even later on, the program was amended to allow payroll for commercial fishing businesses could actually add their crew shares into that loan amount, but that didn't really come through until about a week before the program ended. And also if you'd already applied for a loan, you couldn't get your loan amount adjusted. So while the eligibility kept expanding, if you applied early on, you weren't always able to go back and take advantage of those changes. And so that really limited some opportunity. In the middle of all that, probably in June, the state of Alaska rolled out what's called the Alaska Cares Program. And that program is focused as a expense reimbursement program. And so a business would submit an application and lay out all of the expenses that you either paid for or are anticipating. Initially, it was for, I think, 6 weeks before you apply and 6 weeks after you apply. It is also limited to businesses that had not received any EIDL or PPP funds. And then also the business had to have a state business license. And so that really caused a lot of our businesses to be left out. So if you got $1,000 through EIDL, you were no longer eligible for Alaska Cares. That program also evolved significantly, especially in the last couple of weeks. So people that were left out initially, especially because they received other funds, were finally able to apply in July. And they allowed people who had received $5,000 to apply, and then also some limited entry permit holders. And then people were kind of caught in this trying to make a decision between giving back the PPP money and applying for Alaska Cares, or keeping the PPP money and foregoing Alaska Cares. And then eventually the program evolved where it didn't matter if you could receive any amount of PPP and still apply. And then probably 2 days after that, they ran out of funding. And so I would say across the board, it's worked really well for some businesses. It hasn't worked at all for other businesses, especially not through anything that they've done, but sometimes depending on how they have their business organized, those programs aren't, able to be flexible enough for some. And then in some cases, businesses weren't eligible till the very end, right before the program closed down. So that's been the last 6 months in a nutshell on the grant program side.
Thank you for that thorough explanation, Director Borough. Member Lynn, does that answer your question?
It does. Liz did exactly what I was after, showing the complexity and the changes in which the businesses have had to worm their way through, so to speak. Thank you.
Absolutely. Member Mucci, you were on deck.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple questions here. So, Liz, I guess one's for Liz, is so the businesses that want to apply, they'll turn their application into the borough, and who makes the decision if the grant requests are going to be funded? That's my first question. Thank you.
Sure. So it's just really a formula that we're going to use for most businesses based on their gross sales. So almost every business that is customer-based and selling retail is registered with the borough and provides a monthly report on their gross sales. And so we have that information already. But we would look at a comparison between months of the summer, April, May, and June in 2019 compared to April, May, and June in 2020. And if there's more than a 20% decline in sales, then they would be eligible, or more than $10,000. And then when we looked at what that difference is, we would try and mitigate that loss, up to that $25,000. But probably looking at, the goal is to look at 20%, mitigate 20% of their loss, up to $25,000. And so it's not really a judgment call for most people. It's just really based on their past sales.
Yeah, thank you very much. My other question is on that attachment A that we have in our packet. It talks about economic support grants. And if we go down to allowable expenses, and the second, bullet that's down there talks about payroll costs and expenses. It says employee benefits includes, the first part on there is cost of vacations. How does that work? I'm just trying to understand that.
Well, to try and make sure that we don't get crossways with the state or with the feds, I actually took this language directly from the state of Alaska grant program, so that, assuming that if we were consistent with them, that they wouldn't be able to fault us for the allowable expenses that we allowed. So if we're doing the same thing as the state, I'm feeling confident that that all of our things will be past muster when the state looks at how we spent the money.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for that clarifier, Director Cabrera. Further discussion? Anyone? All right. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Chelsea?
Yes.
Brandy?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Thank you.
And Resolution 2020-16 passes by a 5-0 vote. Bring us to Resolution 2020-17. Resolution approving the expenditure of $65,000 from the CARES Act Special Revenues Fund for emergency financial assistance to families needing new or additional child care due to the COVID-19 public health emergency. Just before we make a motion, if approved, it will appropriate $65,000 as stated above. I'd entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
And moved by Member Michi and seconded by Member Tremblay. Discussion.
Mr. Mayor?
Yep.
Go ahead, Member Michi.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Of all the money that we have been giving away here on this care funding, for me, this is one of the most important funding that we're going to do for the community. Over the last couple of weeks, or actually more, a couple of months, I've watched how the community struggled with trying to get back to kind of a sense of normalcy, and it seems like the two big things we're struggling with is getting the schools open and having something to do with our young kids and after-school programs. Serendipity has stayed open for the whole time and hasn't asked for much, but for the most part, we've been struggling. I've learned a lot about the child care needs in this community, and I don't think this $65,000 is going to meet all the demands we have, but I was just going through looking at our minutes from the June 15th meeting, and we spent close to $100,000 on a couple portable outhouses, or portable toilets and washing stations that we're going to have an additional cost to getting here. I think the $65,000 that we're investing in the community and in the kids in this community, it's well worth the effort here. I encourage the group that was putting this together to make sure they're asking for enough money, because that money is going to, this care money is going to go away here, and this is an important need for the community, and I'm very much in support of it, and I wanted to thank Johnny Johnson and Becky and all the rest of the folks who worked on this. It's been very helpful to me. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Mucci. Member Lynn, you are on deck.
I got a couple comments since I've been involved with the child care here for a little bit. The rules, I agree with Member Mucci that the rules on these folks have changed considerably. And to be able to even break even, it's almost impossible right now, because they essentially have to cut their cut the number of kids they take because of the requirements for room and what they have to do. And I agree that there's a strong need out there. I do have a question, though. When I looked at the form and that was to be filled out by folks who are in need, one of the questions I got, and this would have to probably go to Joni, but one of the questions I have is, how will you make the determination? Obviously, I think there's going to be more need when you have money available, and I don't think, when I looked at what we have now for CARES Act, it's essentially going to be gone. But how are you going to make the determination? Are you going to who does and who doesn't? Because I don't think there's going to be enough to go around. And I didn't see that in your criteria.
If we could unmute Joni, that'd be great. I'd love to. I think Member Lynn has a question that needs to be answered there, if that's possible. Clerk Thompson?
Yes, Keith.
Line is unmuted.
Thank you very much, Keith.
Thank you, Keith. Joni, the floor is yours.
All right. Okay. Thanks. Well, so this is a really good question and something that the group grappled with, because we're coming up with the request. Children's Center, Eagles Nest, Serendipity, and the After School Academy, and Head Start, and SCOG, and Good Beginnings were all part of this conversation, and the number was based on, well, and of course the STEM and elementary school surveys were based on what families were saying the level of need was, and then but to address that question in the eligibility section, we have, in the event that applications request more than funding available, then it'll be, let's say you've honestly said, I need a $300 child care credit for the month of September. Well, it would be a proportional decrease, so that all who requested assistance will receive assistance, but it may not be $300, it might be $150, for example. And then the other piece that we're working on, and that is, we have pursued CARES Act funding, the state CARES Act funding with ACF, and we've pursued funding another grant with the AK Can Do program, with that hope that perhaps, knowing what September's demand is and October's demand, will perhaps be able to bolster. But that's really, anyways, as you can see, I'm grappling with that, and that's something that we've all been trying to figure out.
Thanks, Joni. Member Lynn, does that answer your question?
It does, and I thank you, Joni. This is really a hard one. It would be for me, and I sympathize with you. Thank you.
Thanks, Member Lynn. I'll chime in before we go any further. Simply put, I'll definitely be voting yes on this. Child care, even in the easiest of times, has always been a challenge in Petersburg. It's and more so now for families. And this, I hate to use the word no-brainer and use that flippantly, but it really feels like it to me on this one that to approve this expenditure to help help families in need. I thank both Joni, Becky Terland, and the other members involved in this. Any further discussion?
Yes, really quick.
You bet, Member.
I'll definitely be supporting this. Thank you to everybody who's been part of trying to figure out how to fill in the gaps and work with these new rules and this new time together. It's been really heartening to see that level of cooperation. And just for the sake of posterity, I wanted to talk about the numbers that Finance Director Chow sent to us regarding working under the assumption that these 3 requests this meeting would be passed. We will have $307,000 left of the CARES Act funding based on the allocations made to this meeting. So just for the record, and this is CARES Act funding that is required to be spent by December 15th. Just bringing us the numbers. So thank you to everybody for all the work done on all of these. It's been a lot behind the scenes.
Thank you, Member Tremblay. Any further discussion? Okay, will the clerk please call the roll?
Chelsea?
Yes.
Brandy?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, 2020-17 passes unanimously. Brings us then to item D, sale of Borough-owned property at 705 Ira 2 Street. On September 2nd, 2020, Clerk Thompson opened 2 sealed bids for the 705 Ira 2 property. Kathy Holtzinger bid $40,101, and the Tlingit Haida Regional Housing Authority bid $40,501. If approved by the Assembly, the Borough will sell the property to Tlingit Haida Regional Housing Authority for $40,501. I would entertain a motion to approve that sale to Tlingit Haida for the price of $40,501.
So moved.
Second.
Been moved by Member Mucci and seconded by Member Tremblay. Discussion. I'll chime in on this briefly then before we move forward on it. For those of you listening at home, this was originally going to be a sole source bid for Tlingit Haida, and Holtzen has requested that we do a bid process. And at the last meeting, the Assembly approved that bid process, and those were the 2 bidders. And I thank Holtzen for bringing that to our attention, and both parties for bidding on the property. Any further discussion? Clerk, please call the roll.
Jay?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Brandy?
Yes.
Chelsea?
Yes.
Thank you.
All right. That sale has been approved unanimously. The Tlingit Haida Regional Housing Authority. Bringing us to item E, 2020 Salmon Season Economic Disaster Request. If approved, the Assembly will send a letter to the Alaska Department of Commerce, Committee on Economic Development, Commissioner Anderson and Governor Dunleavy, requesting immediate action to declare Southeast Alaska an area impacted by an economic disaster based on the 2020 salmon fishing season. I would entertain a motion to approve this letter.
So moved. Second.
Been moved by Member Morrell and seconded by Member Tremblay. Discussion.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, if I might.
Absolutely, Member Lynn. Proceed.
Just a question for the clerk. What is the source of the letter itself?
Well, so it has a few hands in it, and Manager Giesbrecht began the draft letter. I added a little bit. And then we had a meeting with our state lobbyist, and also Randy Ruero, who was Senator Stedman's chief of staff until just recently. And we sent the draft to Randy Ruero, who knows exactly the steps that it takes in order to make something like this actually happen. And he added a lot to the letter, and that's what we have in front of us.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor?
Member Mucci.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've talked to several people in the community about this letter, and, I think the overwhelming people that I talked to said they were pretty disappointed by the tone of the letter. While there definitely has been a disaster in the salmon run here this year, I think the letter needs to, reflect more of what's going on with Petersburg economy here. Last year and coming up here in October, the dive fisheries are taking a big hit. Last year they were assessed a 43% tariff on their cucumbers, and this year they're not going to be a local processor for their cucumbers. So while I know the community needs the funds, and I guess maybe this letter is a starting point on getting that dialogue started. The letter is, we have our hand out again. I don't think we can continually ask the federal government to bail us out year after year here. Later on we're going to have a discussion about what's been going on with the salmon stocks and the herring stocks in Southeast Alaska. And I think if we're going to continue forward with our handout for help from the federal government, I think we need to look at the long-term picture here of what's going on with the fishery stocks in Southeast Alaska and then the stocks in general. There's something going on in the ocean here. We got to start sorting it out, because we can't take too many more years of poor salmon runs and non-existent herring runs and tariffs that are just, beating up our local fishermen. If you look at that under item number 4 there, the request to the president, and there's an article in there about the state lobster fishery back on the East Coast. If you read that article and you look at it very thoroughly, you'll understand that the lobster fisheries on the East Coast are working really collaboratively with the state and federal government back on the East Coast, trying to figure out how to make best of the commercial fishery there. And I'm really voting for it, but there's a lot of people in the community are a little disappointed in the tone of this. But I guess it's a place to start. I was just kind of concerned how it all got started and who was involved with it. But I guess it's a start for a placeholder, but I'm sure there's going to be a lot more discussion about how we're going to move forward with this. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Member Mucci. I think you touched on it. 1 second, Member Lynn. I think you touched on an important part there, Member Mucci, that this discussion will be an ongoing one for sure. This letter is, I would say, a pretty small part of a really big and broader discussion, just to echo your point. Go ahead, Member Lynn.
Yeah, I would like to echo what Member Mucci said, is that when we're talking about economic development, there's a whole bunch of different parts to this, and this talks to one part. I just don't think it's adequate talking about our economy here as a whole, and I think that's what's really needed. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Member Lynn. Any further discussion at this point? Okay, clerk, please call the roll.
Bob?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Chelsea?
Yes.
Brandy?
Yes.
And that letter was passed unanimously. Bring us to item F, letter of support for Petersburg Medical Center's grant applications for COVID-19 emergency funds. Petersburg Medical Center is pursuing various funding sources to cover some of their costs associated with COVID-19. If approved, PMC could use this letter of support from the Borough when applying for grants and other funding opportunities. I would entertain a motion to approve this letter.
So moved.
This is moved by Member Trimbley and seconded by Member Mucci. Discussion regarding this letter. should have to go first on this one. I was glad that Phil and Rose spoke to this, and I want the public to be clear that their medical center is looking for money from all sources. Not just coming to the Borough saying, "Hey, can you help us?" But they are asking for our help, but they're asking for help from anywhere they can get it. And I want it to be known, I really appreciate their diligent efforts to maintain a thriving medical center in our community. And this letter is really an important part of helping them pursue other funds. Any further discussion? Okay. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Jeff?
Yes.
Brandy?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Chelsea?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Thank you.
All right. That letter of support passed unanimously. Available on the Borough website, you'll note communications. These are correspondence received since August 13th. Those can all be viewed on the Borough website. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 letters. Feel free to find them on the Borough website, which brings us to Assembly discussion items. Item A, Southeast Alaska herring and salmon stock decline. Assembly Member Mucci would like to discuss drafting a letter to our state and federal delegation requesting research of ocean conditions to determine the reason for the decline of herring and salmon stocks in Southeast Alaska. Member Mucci, that's your discussion item, so I'll give you the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That's just a heads up. I'm hoping to have a letter drafted for the next meeting here in September. But the letter is going to be asking both our federal and state folks to kind of, who represent us, and our federal people have fisheries people involved. But we need to kind of start looking into what is going on in the ocean around Petersburg and in the oceans period. I mean, earlier we passed this letter for economic disaster funds for the salmon fisheries, but this is a big issue that maybe somebody is working on it, but year after year we can't be asking for federal money for disaster relief money. We need to be looking at the scientific facts of what's going on in the oceans around us. Several people have asked me about, is anybody looking to see what's going on in Chatham Strait, maybe the cod or eating salmon or something. But I think people are a little nervous about what's going on with the fisheries, especially in Southeast Alaska. We can't, we haven't had a herring fishery or a roll-on kelp fishery on the north end for quite a while. Salmon fisheries are kind of in tough shape for the last couple of years here, and I think the sooner we address this, start the conversation going, I think we can head down that road. And I just wanted to give the Assembly a heads up that I'm going to be working with a couple of processors to put a letter together. Thank you.
Thanks, Member Mucci. I look forward to having that letter before the Assembly. Thank you for that. Any other comments?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Member Lynn, proceed.
Back to Member Mucci's letter. I think the letter, I agree with him that we need to look to see what it is, but I think it needs to be broader than just the oceans, because talking with a number of people, there's other factors involved with this that need to also be included. And I would suggest, you said the federal, but I would suggest we do the same thing with the state. And whatever it is, it should be a collaborative effort. And I think that really probably needs to be pointed out in our letter. At least that would be my take on it. Thank you.
Thanks, Member Lynn. Any further discussion on this item? All right, I look forward to having that before the Assembly. Brings us to item B. Any Assembly member comments on this fair day?
Yes, I do.
Go right ahead, Member Tremblay.
Yes, I would just like to remind members of the community to please fill out the census if you have not done so already. Alaska is ranked last among the states for our response rate, and the deadline has been moved from the end of October to the end of September, which is this month. I know time feels a little bit weird to some of us right now, but
at the end of this month, we need to have completed our census form. And it can be done online, and it is very quick. The website is my2020census.gov. Those are the numbers, 2020, census.gov. And a special note that if one of the adults in the household is a tribal member, to make sure that that person is listed as the head of household so that you are appropriately counted for your community within the broader census count. That is extra important for visibility's sake and for funding's sake. And again, our number is low as a state. I think Petersburg does better than others within the state, but overall we need to be at full level in just a few weeks' time. So please, if you have not done so as a household, fill out your census.
Thanks, Member Tremblay. I would echo everything you said. The census, although not a very flashy part of civic duty, is an important one. And I would add one other comment as an Assembly member that, as mentioned in the Mayor's report, vote. Local elections, state elections, federal elections, that is our time for a voice to let our ladies know what we like and what we don't like. And that is our time. That is our way to take action. So vote early. Or day out, but make sure you vote. Thank you kindly. Any other Assembly member comments? Recognitions. Any Assembly members or staff have any recognitions?
Mr. Mayor?
Absolutely, Member Michi. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Hey, I just wanted to acknowledge and thank Alice and Butch Young. They are retiring from the Monday night dinners that have been going on at the Narrows Inn after 7 years of serving meals and ministry to folks who are hungry on Monday nights. The meal started out at the Tide many years ago and currently is at the Narrows Inn, and this COVID thing has changed how things are going, but I just wanted to say thanks to Alice and Butch Young for all their time and effort. I help out when I can from time to time, and it's just it's a pleasure to see them doing this great work for the community. So I just wanted to say thank you.
Thanks, Member Michi. Any further recognitions? Okay, that'll bring us down to the formal recognition of Randy Ruero. Mayor Jensen recognizes Randy Ruero, who worked as Senator Stedman's chief of staff for many years. And Randy has worked really hard for Petersburg and the district for a long time. Those will not be easy shoes to fill by any stretch. So thank you, Randy. With that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So
Second.
Moved by Member Michi and seconded by Member Tremblay. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye. With that, the meeting is adjourned. Thanks, everybody. Good work.
Thank you.